Raghu Vatte. I take care of customer success and product management at ZEDEDA. Been with ZEDEDA for almost 4+ years. Prior to that, had a bunch of experience in networking in companies like Juniper and Cisco and other startups which dealt with virtualization and security outside of data centers. In all that experience, there was always the thing about how to move things out of the data centers, how to move things out of the cloud, and make sure that the end user can get the similar experience. They can actually operationalize their outcomes in such a way that it's very easy for them to actually bring on a service and manage it throughout the life. Now, when I put up this slide, I really struggled with this slide because this is not my style to put up a cheesy style slide to start with. But the point is that I cannot address challenges at the edge without talking about this. In 4 years at ZEDEDA and also in my previous life, the biggest challenge I've found is people coming in and saying, hey, we have done this before. Okay, we did this in the cloud, we did this in the data center. I have this army of people who specialize in that, and they do, by the way. And they say okay, we can handle the edge. Okay, at the beginning of ZEDEDA, I used to fight with them. I used to say, hey, this is not true. This is not, there are so many things that are different about edge, right? And they would go away. And they say no, you don't know anything. I have all the expertise that is needed. Throughout ZEDEDA, in the second year or so, I kind of matured. I learned that, okay, it's a good thing. Let them go away because I know they're going to come back in a year from now. Because these are the problems that you have to actually experience to understand what these problems are. The problems are not about just technology. The problems are not about just hey, I have an app, can I run on this thing? I mean, yes, you can run on an app, your app on this one. A lot of our customers are running Kubernetes on this. Okay, if I take these two antennas out, it's an easy piece of thing. But now if you put these antennas on and then you figure out all the other things that come around it, including saying that, hey, this is a small device, now somebody can take it and walk away. All of these kind of problems are things that you have to experience before you can actually try to figure out how to solve them. And most of the time it's too late because you have already invested, you have already chosen your vendors, you have already chosen your technology, and there's so much inertia about going back and to the drawing board and starting over again. So this is the biggest problem right now in terms of what edge poses and how edge is not same as cloud, but it can be, okay, if you do the right thing. Now, I wanted to talk about the challenges at the edge, and I had all different types of slides, but I thought instead of trying to talk about the challenges at the edge, I want to talk about the people who are trying to solve the challenges at the edge, right? In my view, the solution architects at these very large companies or small companies who are tasked to do this are the real heroes trying to do this. Because first thing, they're trying to solve an almost impossible task. It's a thankless job because if they do it right, no one cares about it. If something goes wrong, it's your fault. And more importantly, the problem is that they do not have a lot of support because they have to go and back and try to fight the same battle, saying that, hey, this is already done in the cloud in 100 different ways. Why are you asking me for more money to do the same thing? Why are you asking me for more resources, right? So to build up what the actual challenges are, so first of all, let's assume that there is a architect in a very large company. They have already figured out the applications. They have already figured out what to run. They know how to do that. Okay, now it is all about operationalizing it, right? So now, by the way, first of all, I do apologize. I tried a lot to find an architect with all different kinds of arms, but who doesn't look like a male. I wanted to see if there is a unisex portion of it, but I couldn't find it, which is another problem to talk about. But thankfully, in my experience with all the large companies out there, I think it's a very healthy mix right now. It is not 1% to 99%. I would say it's not 50 to 52. Oh, but it is 30, 40 and growing up. I mean, it's a good thing, by the way. So the kind of problems that these architects have to deal with and they have to bring out, right? The first thing is okay, I have my application, it's running. Now it has to be available. It has to be available all the time. and it has to be available on devices like this. Okay. I mean, I brought 4 different types of devices. If you guys don't mind, I'll just pass them around. Okay. The first one that I'm passing around, I mean, I'll just keep it. So, I wanted to get devices that can give you like an idea of what are all the different types of things, right? The first one is like a pretty powerful one. I mean, it's a 16 gig, 8-core device with all different types of I/O on it, and also all different types of connectivity, right? Those are the kind of things that can be popped up in an oil field or anything. But now you need to have these things always available. It's not just about the hardware that is available. Everything from the metal outside to the applications inside need to be available. And the second thing is like just the hardware diversity they have to deal with, right? If I'm running an application in the cloud or on a data center, it's very, very predictable. I know exactly what I'm going to get when I deploy that application. I know exactly what the resources are, if the resources, how is it handled, all of those things I know. But with these kind of hardware, like you really do not know because they are out in the field, right? And also the type of I/O that you have, the kind of quality of these devices. Some of those devices, the Siemens device that is out there, I'm passing around, that's guaranteed to last for 7 years or 8 years, right? And they're guaranteeing that like, hey, I'm going to make sure that every part is available for 7 years, so that like, if you invest in this device, put it out there and like, make sure it is running, and if something happens, then it is going to run. And even if something happens, there are parts available. We have to deal with those kind of things. And then on the other extreme, people cut corners for $1 and then like make really bad architectural choices because like, hey, I'm doing 1 million of these devices and now $1 adds up, right? So those are all the kind of things that you have to deal with. Edge scale. Again, I do want to say like distributed edge scale here. I couldn't fit the whole thing in that slide, but the distributed edge scale is different. We are not talking about a few of these devices. In our, I mean, like we are still, I do still consider ZEDEDA to be like going up the ramp. We are not like we have not completed our mission yet, right? Like we just started. A few years back, like when I joined, with the pitch that I was given and the reason why I joined is like, hey, we are solving a market problem that we know is going to happen, okay? And the trajectory is that in 2 years from now or 3 years from now, we'll meet the problem and we'll have a product when the problem is really there and people are willing to pay for this to solve this problem, right? But I think like we were wrong. The problem came in faster, okay? So every single device that you guys, I'm passing around, including this big one here, right? These are like deployed in thousands just on our system. So everyone has like thousands and thousands of these devices, and people are not thinking about how do I manage that single device. They're thinking about how do I manage the fleet of these devices. So every problem that you have to solve for a fleet. You're not solving for an individual site. You're not solving for an individual device or things like that, right? And then safety. This is, for me, I think like this is the biggest learning in ZEDEDA. So I came from an IT background. I dealt with security. I dealt with how to do all different kinds of things, operationalize things, right? I go in and like I talk to people in oil and gas, people in industrials, and I'm sitting there just like this and like telling them, hey, this is how you should be doing, okay? And then within 2 minutes, they slapped me on the hand and they said like, hey, you don't know what you're talking about, okay? When was the last time you decided to do something in a data center or a cloud? Something went wrong and somebody lost a limb or like, God forbid, somebody lost their life, okay? So these guys, they are, I mean, like the kind of people that are trying to solve these problems, right? The architect, he's not only thinking about how to get the application out there, run it, but it's safe. We have, and I'm sure like Erik will talk about these things when he's talking about security. Things matter in a sense that like it is not a loss of productivity, it is not loss of revenue, it's a loss of life, it's polluting the oceans, whatever you want. These are like really, really important things. And it's good and bad, right? Like people think about it in terms of like, hey, do I make sure like no one loses a limb? Okay, that's one. Do I make sure that like the company doesn't get hit with a PR nightmare because they just dumped a bunch of oil in the ocean? Okay, so all of these things, they are thinking about it on a continuous basis. And when you start thinking about it, the way you solve a problem is completely different. You don't take, it's very conservative way of solving problems. Yes.
So it happened also yesterday that, some of other presenters totally forgot security in terms of logical and physical security. And I see it happening again. I mean, so
No.
at the edge is, mandatory. I mean, so,
Oh, yeah.
But why it's not listed as one of the biggest challenges?
Oh, it is. The thing is, like, it's not just about one circle. That is what, like, I wanted to get out of this thing. And it's not just about one circle. It's about layers and layers. It's an onion. You have to peel it, every single thing. And like everything, even if a circle in the middle is rotten, then like you're gone, right? The whole onion is gone. It's the same thing, okay? It's the weakest link. And you're only as strong as the weakest link. And these things will expand. So the next problem that the edge faces is the workforce. Okay, so, and this is something that we have learned too, that it's not enough to like create a solution that can work, but it is very, very important to create a solution that can be handled by workforce of different nature. I put four items in here, but there are more than that, right? There are workforce that are like skill mismatch. So you go in and like these are the guys who are technically like the best people in oil and field, or they are the technically best people oil and gas fields, or like on industrial floors, right? But now you are taking a solution like this and asking them to manage an IT solution. You are asking them, hey, why don't you create a pod for Kubernetes, or why don't you do attestation here? And they're like, what are you asking me to do? This is not what I know, right? Now, you have to create a solution where that fits, okay? And you have to make it easy for them to do that. The next thing is just a diverse workforce. Because these things are physically disparate locations, just because you got like a couple of people in one site doesn't mean you will get the same quality, same number, same type on the different thing. And now multiplied by 1,000, because now you have 1,000 sites, right? There are 4 or 5 of these devices in each site. And like, how do you manage those things? That's the second one. The third one, and the workforce availability. At the beginning, I always thought, and this is my personal opinion, by the way, I always thought, hey, we are doing all of this automation so that we are taking jobs away. Okay, at the end of the day, the big companies are thinking about like doing all of this so that they can reduce the workforce, they can increase the revenue, profits, and all of those things, which is, I mean, like everyone has a fiduciary responsibility. They have to do what they have to do, right? But that is actually not true. What happens is that like there are a lot of places this workforce is just not available. Okay, you're in the middle of nowhere, you're managing a wind turbine, and now you want somebody, IT person, to be there in that place? No. One of the first things that these guys pulled a prank on me was like, when I joined, is like, hey, we have to install something on a wind turbine. Do you want to go? I said, yeah, why not? I mean, it's a fun thing. I get to climb the turbine and everything, right? Like, I go there, we did the job, like, thankfully, like, everything worked. But the point is, like, that place is like, there was one Dennis, and there is nothing else in that place. You cannot expect your real workforce to be available there, right? Even if you pay them, they won't go there. Okay, so those are the kind of problems that you have to talk about. And then obviously the last one is like the low skilled workforce too. I mean, like we are talking about oil and gas and all of that, but that's not the only edge, right? The other edge is like, think of a kiosk, the parking meter kiosks. It has like 5 or 6 different components, from cameras to like printers to like card readers, all of those things. That's an edge too. And when you put that together, who is managing that? It's a minimum wage person who is sitting outside and trying to make sure like things work. So you have to deal with all of these things. And then you have to do it in such a way that it's a fleet level management. Life cycle, people shouldn't be doing the truck rolls to do this, right? People shouldn't be doing, creating new applications just so that they can run on the edge, because these applications are there already. And then they have to be able to reuse the workforce that they already have, that they have built over years, to make sure that it is cloud-like, all the cloud features and all the cloud applications, CI/CD pipelines, everything. And they should be able to automate everything too. Okay. Otherwise, like there's no way you are going to handle the thing for a full fleet of thousands and thousands of devices. Okay. And when you do all of this, then you look at the layer of the security, I mean, you have to look at the layer of security right from silicon all the way to the apps. But security is not just about the application. Security is not just about the sheet metal out there, right? Security is about everything that is the full workflow, right from the people you hire to the people who operate. And then you have to deal with all different kinds of problems. Untrusted sites, okay? So like these devices go into places that are not, I mean, you cannot put them there because like there's no physical security. People can walk in and like grab the things. They can open the box, take the SSD out of it or the drive out of it and put it back in. You won't even know, right? So those are the kind of things you have to deal with. You have to deal with low trust workforce because these are not like vetted fully. These people who are touching these devices are not vetted fully, all of those kind of things. And then obviously like you have to deal with untrusted hardware because anyone can come in and like change things. So now how do you make sure that all of these things are handled properly? All of these things are implemented, and how do you make sure that these things are enforced on the edge? Okay, and these are the real challenges that you have to face. It's not just about one challenge; it's a set of challenges, and that is what ZEDEDA wants to build. Where like you go in and say that these are all the challenges. We want to solve this problem in such a way that like the end user who is operating and the person who is actually designing this from ground up knows that there is a way that they can do all of these things. I mean, the reality is not everyone is thinking like this. There are a few people who are really thinking like this because they're super smart or they have already got burned once. Okay, so that is all happening. But the thing is like, when you do this, there is no one solution that can take care of all of this. Okay, and that was the thing like that sold me when I joined ZEDEDA, when I was talking to Saeed, hey, what are we solving? And this is all the problems that we are solving. And I knew like, okay, like this is something that I want to get in on because like this is something that the market needs. There is a need for it. And this is where like we have to go and make sure that we solve it. If we solve it in the right way, it's a great product to build. It's fun and everything, but it's also something that becomes like really meaningful, right? Right. So these are the challenges at the edge.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Sure.
About wording? So distributed edge is like all over the marketing materials and on the slide.
Mm-hmm.
But you're saying edge. So are you using the term distributed to really talk about what your target audience is, the people that are looking to deploy thousands of devices and use that as part of their edge computing setup?
Mm-hmm.
So is that why you're using the word distributed? Because these same problems exist when it's not a widespread kind of IoT type edge as well.
Yeah, these problems exist in different scenarios. The reason why we chose distributed edge is exactly for the question you asked, right? That like edge is nowadays like everywhere. And we wanted to like make sure that like we are not diluting the message by talking about edge and like somebody comes in and, hey, I want to do this on a telco edge where like there is armed guards outside, or they're not really, but like there can be. Hey, is this the same problem? The thing is like, for distributed edge, where you have like these thousands of sites, you have all these kinds of problems. This is really, really pertinent. Okay? So, but for the other areas, these things actually are the same too, but maybe not all of them. Okay. But for us, what our mission is to like solve and build something that can actually address this problem, and that's the reason we are using the distributed. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Thank you.
I enjoyed these. One of the things that I think we've developed an appreciation for is the Nook in the edge space. And I'm wondering, do you have a broader hardware ecosystem, and would you have those types of platforms for lower cost environments as well?
Yeah, definitely. And great question, by the way. And I think like Erik is going to touch upon it. But we currently have around like 80, 85 different models of devices that are supported fully. And they are just models. Then there are variations of them, right? Obviously, I couldn't bring a lot of them. My guys in my lab, or I already had to like tell them like, okay, I'm going to take you guys out for lunch because like I'm taking these things out of the lab. Yesterday night, I went and got the lab. But yes, Nook is like one of the very popular ones, especially when it comes to like places where you want to put in cameras to it, you want a kiosk kind of a machine, you want like a basic HMI. Okay, those are Nooks are really good in there.
Okay, good, thanks.
Okay, so I talked about all the problems. How do we solve it, actually? Okay. So the way we architected it right from the beginning is that it has to be intent-driven. And there are multiple players in this equation, right? It is not just about one person sitting there. That architect that I'm talking to is like the reason why that person has like that many arms is because there are so many people who are giving him requirements or her requirements, and then they have to solve that problem. And there are more than three, definitely, but I just put three in here to drive a point. There are operations teams. There are actually infrastructure teams who are really worried about the devices. How do I keep them powered on? If it goes down, like, is there a UPS that can take care of it? All of those kind of things, right? And also like the firmware and security and everything else. And then there are the application teams that actually create those applications, run those applications, and make sure that the applications are up and running and they create the outcomes. And then there are the operations teams who are worried about like, hey, is there a person who is going to man this? Is that person vetted? Okay, how do I enable this service very, very quickly by reducing the number of IT tickets or the tickets inside the company, right? So those are all the people that or the teams that are worried about solving this problem. And everyone has their own policy. Everyone has their own constraint. They want to put some personality to those end device that gets in there or the end fleet. So the way ZEDEDA has architected this, our solution, and the way we solve it, again, like I'm not going to this, I don't want this to be a product pitch, right? The technology is that all of these people get to describe their intent when they create a ZEDEDA deployment. And once they put all this intent together, that becomes a ZEDEDA deployment. And that results in a fleet level properties, in a site level properties, in a node or cluster level properties. Okay? And then these properties are then applied to an individual node that is sitting out in the field. Okay, now a site might have like 10 nodes, right? And all these nodes will get their own properties, their own policy, their own constraints, but these are described at a very high level. And then that trickles down, creates the next set, and then that trickles down to go on to the actual device level implementation. Okay. And it has to be an intent-driven, and it has to be a multi-role thing, right? Now, that is how you create it. And this is where like all these admins and everyone else came together, they decided what to do, and they created the policy, personality, and identity of these devices. And Erik is going to go a lot more into those details to figure out like what that means of identity and everything. But they create this ZEDEDA deployment. But parallelly, we have also created workflows to operationalize it. And the operationalizing is not from the architect, right? Like they most probably will not touch more than 5 or 6 of these devices when they are doing it in the labs or like when they're trying to figure it out. But the real people who are churning out these devices are the hardware manufacturers or the systems integrators who are putting these things together. And then what they do is like they just drop ship this whole thing to the end customers. Because now we are talking about these thousands and thousands of end sites, they go to these end sites. And once these devices are stamped out at the hardware manufacturer or SIs and go back, the idea is that when they go, you shouldn't send an IT person along with that. You shouldn't be able to have a person who knows what is there on this device, except for making sure that the device is physically secure, right? So what happens next? The device goes to the field tech, and this can be anyone, depending on who is on call on that day, who is on the payroll on that day, right? And they get this box, and then a box or a cluster of these boxes, and then they get a paper with it which says like, okay, you have to connect a red cable to the red port, green cable to the green port, power it on, and what happens is that device then calls back home and talks to the ZEDEDA orchestrator. It talks to the orchestrator and it says, hey, the intent here is to deploy these applications. But there is a very big piece that is there, which is most of these applications today have their own orchestrators. If I'm running an SD-WAN, let's say I'm running a connectivity application, right?
Raghu, can I get you to roll back to the field? No, slide's good. The field tech that you've got there. Are we talking about courier delivering this thing and plugging it in?
No, I mean, let's say, I mean,
we're talking about actually sending an employee who has some
no,
skill.
it's not an employee. Let's assume like this is an industrial manufacturing floor, or like it's an oil and gas site, right?
Yeah.
So the person who is at that site, they are taking care of drilling. Or it's a truck that is going from one site to another site to make sure that they characterize the reservoirs. Okay. So now the person gets it. The person who is driving the truck or like manning that floor or manning that line gets it. And they have a very clear instructions, which doesn't need an IT skill set to.
No, I just want to be clear on that because field tech, to me, specifically means a trained engineer.
Oh, yes.
Well,
Oil field.
I mean, it's my mic. They might be trained, but they might be trained in how do you replace a broken PLC at 4 o'clock in the morning, right?
Yes,
or
exactly.
a motor in the assembly line,
Yeah,
right?
for your OT driven.
OT
Okay.
driven.
If you start getting, quick service restaurant was one that came up yesterday. That's not going to be somebody with any technical skills.
Exactly, right?
Minimum wage work.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where like we were doing like a very large retail set deployment, and the thing is like, okay, there is IT people and everyone in those places, but the people who actually touch them are most probably these young teenagers who are there in that place because they work there, right? Like if something goes wrong, this guy picks a phone up and like say go do something. They find a device like this, then they plug in things. All right. So anyway, the ZEDEDA, one of the things that we have done, and this is over the last 4 years, is through partnerships, through ecosystem plays and everything else, we have worked with a lot of different companies who provide these services. So if there is an SD-WAN, so ZEDEDA can now go and like talk to the third-party administrator, set up things, whatever is needed to set up, whether it is a runtime, whether it is a firewall manager, SD-WAN manager, or an application orchestrator, right? It can be any of those things. They do that, and then they collect enough information from them through setting it up so that they can feed that and bootstrap the applications that are going to be running on that end device. Okay.
So, question again. So when the hardware devices arrive, they don't have any OS on them.
They have the Eve OS on them and nothing else.
Okay. All right. So they're to the point that they have an OS.
They have an OS.
And then this is okay, I got it. Thank you.
I've got an additional question on that. So I might have missed it or it might be coming, but how does a hardware device know which tenant it belongs to in the ZEDEDA cloud?
Yep. So it's based on the identity of the hardware device. I'm just touch upon it very quickly, but like Erik has a lot more to talk about it. So the identity can be based out of a special cert that is generated because of the fact that like there is a TPM and everything in there. The identity can be based out of a serial number, and we have enough IP on our side, or I shouldn't say Eve has enough IP on its side so that like no one else can spoof it. And there are different workflows using which the identity is preserved, and when that device calls home, based on that identity, we already know because it's already commissioned somewhere, right? So like now, based on that identity, we know where to place that device exactly, and we have workflows that guarantee that like there won't be any spoofing or like one device doesn't go into another thing.
Okay. So you have a global registry or global directory of all the devices?
No, not all the devices, but when this this administrator or the operations manager here, right? The operations team, what they do is they place a PO. Okay, they place a PO to, let's say, like we are talking of this is a HPE box. They place a PO to HPE and they say like, okay, I want 500 of these devices and they need to be shipped to these 20 sites or 50 sites. Now, as part of that, they get the serial numbers of that. Okay, so now that's enough. Some people are like a little bit more security conscious and they just don't want to do that serial number. They want to go to the next step and like get the TPM related stuff, or like they want to get a cert that is there, or create their own soft serial which cannot be spoofed. So we have workflows for all of them. And as part of that, this admin of the operations manager puts that into their tenant. And now once it is in their tenant, when the device calls home, then you have already done the admission control, and so that is how you can say which device belongs to where. Okay, and and then like the last thing is like once the devices, once the applications boot up, because now they are bootstrapped with all the required information and everything else, they call back to their orchestrators, and the full service is done, right? At this point, now the centralized operations will have a full view of like what is happening on their fleet, that is like thousands of physical locations wide. And you have just achieved a zero-touch service enablement, okay? And by the way, this is not slideware. This is how our customers deploy thousands and thousands of those devices, right? And this is how they choose us. This is why they choose us, okay? And this centralized policy and constraints and enforcement, there is no or low service enablement tickets. This is the biggest thing that accounts for like time to service and also the TCO of the whole thing.
So the front end of it, if the customer's orchestrator that they want to use for whatever application they're pushing down to the field, if it's not on the list of things you work with, do you help them?
Yes.
Get, okay.
So we as part of like bringing up a new customer, if they have like a new orchestrator that or a new service that they have onto, we have some services that are natively available in ZEDEDA, but most often than not, like we have to partner with somebody who does this for a living, right? Like we are doing the orchestration plane of it, we are doing the native services, but like if somebody wants to have an SD-WAN or somebody wants to have a container orchestration, right? Like they have built this over like 5, 6, 7 years, okay? And we have a healthy respect for them, right? So like we partner with them and make sure like we integrate. And at the end of the day, the customer gets a single pane of view, so that like it becomes very, very easy. Okay?
And just to add why we did this is a lot of these customers made decisions on the SD-WAN when they're on a firewall vendor, on their orchestration container. And they don't want to change it because they're doing edge. As a matter of fact, they want to have a consistent architecture across. So we therefore had to support that early on.
At the end of the day, you need orchestration, right? Without orchestration, you will not be able to achieve all the things that we talked about. And it's just not practical. And even if you are hell-bent upon doing it, it's just not economical. So that's the reason like why people are choosing a technology and an architecture like this. And that's the reason why like I think like whatever we have built right now is apt for the market. And like we are growing both in terms of our customers, but also in terms of our maturity and the functionality that we are building into the product.